Estamos en vivo, en directo, aquí en este sexto ya conversatorio digital, en este proyecto entre Chile California Council y Ladera Sur llamado ¿Y después qué? Construyendo un planeta resiliente. Un ciclo que, como les comentaba en este principio, ¿no?, de este conversatorio, ya lleva 6 webinars digitales sobre diversos temas, los cuales además han sido, gracias a ustedes, a su participación, súper exitosos y estamos muy contentos. Esperamos que este conversatorio, que es específico, es muy interesante, se trata de filantropía, también justamente les parezca súper entretenido, tal como a nosotros, y seguro así va a ser porque tenemos un panel realmente increíble. El tema de hoy entonces es filantropía, un motor clave para la activación económica. ¿De qué se trata la filantropía? ¿Cuáles son sus orígenes? ¿Les resuena algo? Bueno, si queremos profundizar en este concepto y comprenderlo, seguro tienen que quedarse acá con nosotros en directo en YouTube, en el canal de Chile California Council, y luego va a estar en el canal de Ladera Sur, pero también nos pueden ver a través del Zoom. Beto está en California en este momento, él va a estar hablando en inglés, por lo tanto, si ustedes quieren tener traducción, pueden entrar al link que tenemos en este momento en YouTube para ingresar al Zoom donde están los traductores. Si lo ven abajo, hay un circulito que representa el mundo, ahí sale interpretación, ahí apretan ustedes el intérprete del idioma en el cual quieren escuchar todo este conversatorio. Si quieren participar haciendo preguntas, haciendo comentarios, también lo pueden hacer a través de este mismo Zoom. Abajo, donde sale chatear, ahí ustedes quiero decir, pueden escribir sus preguntas, sus comentarios, y nosotros los vamos a ir leyendo. Lo mismo en todo caso sucede en nuestros canales.
In our channels as well, and you can also see the tremendous team that is going to be attentive to all of the comments that you might have. And I think that we are now ready to go to start beginning this conversation. As I was saying at the beginning, we have a tremendous panelist today, and we are very happy to have them here today. Bedolfe, Herbert, you are here in California. You are the executive director of the Marisla, with base in California. He is one of the founders of Oceana, and he has dedicated, he has been since 1992. Welcome,
Gracias,
Bedolfe.
Barbara. Qué bueno estar aquí con todos de ustedes. Thank you so much. I am just honored to be a part of this group of really highly esteemed panelists. I know them, and I really love them and respect them. It's great to be on this panel. Thank you for inviting me. I just want to say thank you to Ladera Sur and the Chile California Council, because the work that you are all doing is so extremely important, and I will add, especially in these dark days that we're living in now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Beto, for your words.
Yeah, thank you for hosting us and keeping us nicely organized. I want to start by just saying in a book about philanthropy that I really learned a lot. It's called A Gift Observed. The author is Michael Lerner. But he states that the ancient philanthropy was totally unrelated to money. Now, just think about that for a moment. Philanthropy, in the ancient ways of defining philanthropy, it was unrelated to money. Rather, it was to serve others with wisdom and passion. The objective was to serve people with the right act in the right way at the right time. Okay, things have changed, things have evolved. There's a lot of different definitions of philanthropy today, but even in the current definition, which is so monetized and organized, I still think at the core, you have to take in that philanthropy revolves around the responsibility of an aware citizen to the community. In other words, philanthropy has a responsibility to the community. I'm not an expert on philanthropy, but I've been a practitioner there since 1998. So I've seen the incredible results that Chilean NGOs have achieved with the support of philanthropy. The connection between California and Chile has become quite strong on several fronts, including in the fields of philanthropy and environmental activism and education. Although there's many reasons for this, the most relevant California has a mirror image. It's almost California in reverse. With its beautiful coast, its deserts, mountains, deserts, its magnificent rivers, and of course, amazing people. All these things have led Californians to have a strong affinity for Chile. I've been asked about how environmentalism and philanthropy evolved in California. I think there are three examples that led to this path. And they evolved over the last more or less 150 years. The first action you'd say was caused by the Great Flood of 1862. 1862, a long time ago, more than 150 years ago. Strong rains hit California, washed all the debris and gravel had been dredged up by the gold mine down into the valleys and covered up very valuable agricultural land, and filled up rivers and streams that had been used for navigation. Okay, people weren't very happy about that. That led to the first environmental action of putting in controls for water pollution and disposal of waste. Another critical event that led to not only activism, environmentalism, and philanthropy was the damming and the destruction of the Hetchy Valley in Yosemite National Park. There was an environmental fight. However, the dam and the aqueduct were constructed, and the valley was destroyed. So the environmentalists and the philanthropists lost that, but I think they became more determined. And then there's many more examples on this path. But probably one of the most important, if not the most important is in 1970 was the founding of Earth Day. Earth Day, what we call it in English, and it was with the understanding that we only have one Earth, so let's take care of her. In some, what really happened in those days was you can see that people were working to save beauty, wilderness, and biodiversity. However, just like philanthropy, the definition of environmentalism has changed through the years, and now it's much more expansive, and it even includes protecting people's health and communities from toxic chemicals, poisons, and things of that nature. So that's a very quick summary, but I'd be glad to answer questions later. It's interesting to note that American philanthropy in Chile comes from many different states. In other words, American philanthropists who have been supportive of NGOs in Chile, they come from all over the United States. However, California has been a very big player in U.S. philanthropy that's been supportive of NGOs in California. I'm in California, and many others who love Chile and have been helpful there are also from California. I think the reason behind this is because Californians understand why, the porqué. Why Chileans want to protect Patagonia, the coast, the mighty river, the native forest, and even the fungi that live in Chile. Believe it or not, fungi is a world center for fungi, which is really one of the kingdoms of the world, and so important. But even down, you have the mountains, the forest, the rivers, the coast, but down to also the fungi. Californians just find Chile so very unique and important. I just want to add that Chile's achieved so much on the environmental front, and they've really protected their natural resources. It's not easy, but they've been very successful. And it's important to say that the heroes of these you'd say fights are not the philanthropists, but rather they're the Chilean activists and organizers and educators who work so hard to protect specific places and educate children and adults to the importance of a healthy environment. The value proposition, everyone's going, well, what's the value proposition? The value proposition in this is that it's a synergistic relationship. The NGOs figure out what issues they're going to work on and fight for. They figure out the tactics. The philanthropists believe in what the NGO is doing and supports them in that. And then if all goes well, the environment wins too. So it's very synergistic. I would just like to say that something always comes up that environmentalism is the enemy of a strong economy. And case after case illustrates that this is not true. Here in California, we have many examples. Probably some you all know about, but just one. We had an initiative called the Marine Life Protection Act, which began with an idea to create a series of marine protected areas up and down California, scientifically based. And this idea was attacked by business interests that said it was going to wreck fishing related businesses, communities, and they were very angry about it to the point of filing lawsuits and things of that nature. But scientists, environmentalists, government officials, even business leaders came together to work through the problem. And finally, after 8 years, got it implemented. And lo and behold, what happened? There's more fish. None of the doomsday scenarios came true. The opposite. There's more fish. Coastal communities are doing better. Sport fishers are doing better. Commercial fishers are doing better. People come from all over the world to go. People come from all over the world to go to the beaches. Tourism is up. It was a very good thing. It wasn't a bad thing for the economy. It was a good thing. In Chile, you have lots and lots of examples as well. We'll hear about Patagonia. That's amazing. But Chilean NGOs fought to get sensible fisheries laws and regulations in place, and those were also attacked. It would destroy fishing. It was going to be a problem. That kind of thing. Just for example, there's about 1 million artisanal fishers in Chile, and what's that mean? That means there's a 1 million families that depend on artisanal fisheries. And as fisheries were being depleted, these communities were being negatively impacted. With sensible laws and regulations now in place, there's not even only more fish and better regulations and reduced illegal fishing, but the effects have spilled over to coastal communities and artisanal fishers. They have better catches. They can look for export markets. And obviously, before COVID, even tourism was up. So I just want to say that there's plenty of to fight back anyone says environmentalism is a problem for a strong economy. And one editorial comment that I think we should all keep in mind is many destructive projects are justified by saying these are going to create jobs. This project, which might destroy this ecosystem, this valley, this forest, we can't pay attention to that because it's going to create jobs. But there's something wrong with saying you're going to create jobs by destroying jobs. In other words, just as an example, going back to the artisanal fisheries, you should not base a future project on destroying the jobs that exist already. So there are communities that have lived and prospered for hundreds of years. You cannot justify wrecking lives in the name of creating new jobs, which may or may not happen. So it's an honor to be on this webinar with Barbara. I can't thank you enough for hosting us. Ladera Sur, Chile California Council. What you're doing just demands the highest respect. I can't thank you enough. And just in closing, I want to say there's a saying that has been attributed to various cultures. They say it in different ways. But it goes like this. The longest journey you will ever make in your life goes from your head to your heart. And so, we can use lots of terms like value proposition and things, or the most cynical crassest way of saying, what's in it for me? Which we hear from certain people in public. But anyway, what's the value proposition here? The longest journey you will ever make in your life goes from your head to your heart. I would say that philanthropists and environmentalists in Chile are helping each other make that journey. And so there is the value. And so, Barbara, I'll end on that. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Beto, de todo corazón por tus palabras inspiradoras.
Thank you very much for your words, for your last phrase, and inspiring and mentioning those things that I thought was very beautiful. And Patricia and Eugenio are going to agree with me that the fungi world. So we'd like to send greetings to all of our friends from the foundation. And also I'd like to present the rest of the foundation. And they asked if you could repeat the name of the book that you mentioned at the beginning, please.
Yes, that's my pleasure. It's called A Gift Observed. The author is Michael Lerner, Lerner, and the subtext, I think, is Essays on Philanthropy and Civilization. So it's very deep. What he did was go way back in time and essentially research philanthropy from its beginnings to the current day.
Buenísimo, muchas gracias.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I would like to present now to Eugenio and Patricia, who are here. Patricia Morales, she is General Manager of the Solari Cortés Philanthropy and she's also an economist of the University of Louvain in Belgium, and she's also from the Paris School of Economics in France. Thank you, you are very welcome to this panel. Thank you very much. And Eugenio, he's the Executive Director of Amigos de los Parques of Patagonia. He's also a member of the Red de Filantropía Ambiental de Chile. He has a master's in philanthropy, public, and Adolfo Ibáñez. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you very much. Well, Beto already gave us a map about a little bit of what is happening. It happens in Chile. He gave great examples of what happens in other places, especially California. But I would also like to ask you, Eugenio and Buddy, if you could give us a few more examples. What are the biggest gaps? What are the international cases beyond what happens just in California? And also, Beto commented about the benefits for the people in environment and philanthropy. If you could go a little bit deeper into that as well, and also comment. I know it's a lot of questions in one, but I'll leave you questions. What is the benefit, the development, financial development of the country and the local areas, etc.? Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and for the Chile California Council and who are our friends. We work strongly with them, and to all the guests, friends. When I was told about this conversation. I thought it was very interesting because effectively, I think in philanthropy, there is a lot of information, but at the same time, there is not much knowledge and it's very standardized. So I'd like to articulate some answers regarding what you were speaking of. First of all, I think it's important to have some definitions about what philanthropy is because that helps open the path. And Beto was saying that there are different definitions, and we have um, the University of we say that it is the actions that are derived for public utility. This also has to do, at least for us, it has to do with the action of private in the sense of public policy and not the public politics. And it has two areas. And for the first is that it has to, it appeals to a certain responsibility, a social responsibility that people should have that have high income, not only a role of financial richness, but wealth, but also generate social, environmental wealth as well, other kinds of wealth that also has an impact in economics, but maybe not in the formal parameters that we are used to talking about with the economists. And then the second area has to do that if we have to do different actions, we have to work together with what we call the virtuous triangles. You have the private, the socials, and the different areas, the state, private sector, and civil society. So we talk about the philanthropy, we have a comprehensive and sustainable development. So what do we understand by this comprehensive development? What is the paradigm? What is the definition? And since I'm mixing this in with your question, that one main element is how do we measure the poverty in Chile? So it usually has been measured by income, but now we also have, as part of the measure, it has to be multidimensional. And there you have different areas that have to do with education, has to do with health, and it has to do with environmental issues. And it also has to do with a series of things that are associated to climate change, which is an elemental subject for all of us who work in philanthropy, especially environmental philanthropy. So if you ask me what is the benefit of philanthropy and financial, the state, we can't only look at it only as income, as if you can measure the growth of a country having to do with poverty, but you also have to understand that we are analyzing the growth in a multidimensional way, as well as the poverty is being measured in that multidimensional way. And there you have we don't have much data. It's poor, the amount of information we have, since even though it exists and it has existed in different ways, it's not it's not like an institutionalized. What I mean is that there are not that many projects that are called as philanthropical, or that they have an endowment, or that this is going to work this way, and we have the rules of the game that are this specific ways, to be able to have an accountability behind it and say that this is what we really have. But we have numbers or data, and it's very different from the United States, that if we basically, if you're going to give, may your left hand not see what your right hand is doing. There's like this kind of discretion that is understandable, but at the same time, it does not help us very much because it doesn't allow more synergy and more efficiency when we need resources that are necessary for the country. And I would also like to state that this is a conversation that does not have to do with the role of the state or the government, if we want them to be subsidiary or if we want them to be liberal. This goes beyond that. Evidently, the state has a role, and everybody has their opinion on what the role of the government is, but there are other players that are a part and key agents in the development of the country. So the question is, how do we generate an institutionality to these players that are philanthropist players, so that their actions can impact in the best way in public policies, and also in concordance with what is happening from the government and other civil society? So I think the challenges of philanthropy go on two different lines. One has to do with the institutionalizing it. So let's come in agreement. What is philanthropy? How do we guarantee that the actions that have an impact? Like now I was working in a different webinar with the minister and we talk about how sometimes actions in philanthropy are repeated, and And some are also repeated from things that are happening in the government. And then there are people that are left out because they don't know how to be able to do to be able to have access to those funds. So there is a whole area that we need to improve, and also in impact. I think the times are not to be able to assign or allocate resources without being the preoccupation to know exactly the criteria, knowing how complex it is, but at least to try to advance so that we can become more modern as a country. And I think that is one line. And the other line that we have as a challenge is the donation law, which is a great issue in Chile. I think we need to be very prudent. We need to be very cautious, because I have worked in the state and I know that the discussion is you have to basically give a third person these taxes. It's very complex because they have a lot of portfolio that they have to they have to take care of, and they have to prove that they can do it better, or at least as good as the government, and in comparison to the what they are offering. And I think that is something we need a better laws with this area. There is no doubt in that, but how do we get to that conversation and also kill all the lack of confidence that exists, because there's not confidence towards philanthropy. People are, so one good way in different strategies, but I think on my side, and personally, I believe that we need to take those taboos out, is to confront the doubts. Okay, what is your doubt that you might spend the money incorrectly, or that the impact might be less? And then we can have a good conversation that allows the state to be able to switch a little bit and understand that not only the state can do these kind of activities, but there are other players as well. And together they can do even more. So that is the intention or the vision that we have in philanthropy, in public policy and in philanthropy. And to be more concrete, you already know us. We have already been 18 years in the comprehensive and sustainable development and conservation, and in different areas. We have 2 different foundations and 3 reservations that are our parks for conservation, that are in San Pedro, San Jose de Maipo, and in the Patagonia. And we are in places that are complex, having to do with conservation, because it's places where that we have the matrix where the water is. So we work a lot in the public sector, whether it be to see what the natural species that are being threatened, how to conserve those. And we work from what is local to the central, to be able to, whether it be in science or in different programs in the community or in conservation. I don't want to go too long. I imagine we will have more questions later on. Yes, we have a few more questions afterwards. Thank you very much. It was very clear. Now we will go with Eugenio Rengifo. You are muted.
Ahí sí.
Ahí estoy, ¿sí? Sorry.
Eso, ya.
Muchas gracias, Bárbara. Difícil hablar después de Patty.
So it is hard to talk after Patricia and Beto. They are huge speakers. I want to thank you for the invitation. I mean, same as Chile, California, Matias Alcalde, Martin from Ladera Sur, and all of this team. It is great to share with this panel with Beto, Patricia, and you, of course, Barbara, in order to talk about all of these places, Chile, California, this mirror that allows us to get inspiration and to see ourselves in different times. California and the US have gone a long trip in terms of philanthropy. Part of the American ethos has to do with this dream, American dream, and how to return it. That goes through philanthropy, and that has an incentive body which is so clear, that promotes the philanthropic activity. Beto and Patty, they have talked about what philanthropy is. I'd like to mention something about it. It is a dynamic concept. It has grown from its etymology, which is love for man. And now it is a view much wider, where man, which come from humus, fertility, and soil, makes it impossible to separate this love of man from nature, because otherwise there's no human activity that could flourish. So from Amigo de los Parques, we think philanthropy is, we need to give it a last name, environmental philanthropy, for instance. But philanthropy, of course, includes its love towards everything that allows us to grow, nature, everything around us, because we are part of it. I just wanted to mention that. And it has to do with activities which do not want to make it perfect, but there's only love and a connection with something that we like and love. So therefore, it's important to mention that it is not exclusive of billionaires. When we talk about philanthropists, we imagine a fat guy who's got so many bills or so much, tons of meals. But we're talking about passion, a local cause, and that could be done through resources, money, or time, talent, connections, so on. Many different actions that could be much stronger than money itself. So I just wanted to say this, which oftentimes makes this philanthropy concept, it's associated to something which is so far away for millionaires and billionaires. So the call here, it is that philanthropy, it is also at a human scale where everyone can contribute with something, with his passion and love. Here in Chile, philanthropy in general terms, culturally, because of our traditional, which is Jew and Christian, it is related to charity. You feel kind of guilty when you have too much, and therefore, it goes towards education, health, and culture. We have examples in the 19th century, Juan Arrojo, workers, people in Valparaíso, and different experiences related to education and culture. Currently, the world is facing dynamic challenges, difficult challenges. We're not live, neither in California and Chile. We are getting connected through Zoom, and because we're in a pandemic, and we need coordinated, articulated actors where the local wisdom and the innovation space, it is a key factor. And to do so, philanthropy, it is a fertile soil that gives us some speed, capability, reaction, which is different to the ones which other actors have in society, the state or other institutions. Due to that, because of their features, it takes longer for them, or sometimes they do not know what's happening. And therefore, we have a huge agenda that includes the sexual minority rights and environmental rights that would have not been included by the state, but they have been shown by volunteers, philanthropists, people in the end. In the current context, vaccinations with Bill Gates, technological advancements, university.
Y legó todo su dinero a esta obra.
Waiting for him to get connected.
Y dejó a sus familiares muy enojados porque no les dejó un peso. Son ejemplos bonitos de cómo desde distintos sectores y en nuestro país también la filantropía ha tenido un impacto.
In our country, philanthropy has some wonderful impact as well. So therefore, it is important to have some institutionality that makes this easier. Here in Chile, the most formal sector, let's say it that way, that has some philanthropic actions, we're talking about NGOs, foundations, corporations, they are around 300,000, and that's a sector that gives jobs to many different people, and therefore you decentralize solutions to problems. It creates a lot of public incidents, and it provides many different services that the state does not. But Chile has a framework which is so abundant of legal bodies, which are so complex for donations. And therefore, philanthropy cannot sometimes really contribute for the well-being of the country, which is so necessary. The environmental challenge is even worse, because not only it is this complex legal framework, but it is also a framework that includes punishments based in distrust. A judge will say if what you do, it contributes to something or not. That takes at least 6 months for the judge to decide if you're contributing into something or to the environment. So it is important also to mention that thanks to the public and private efforts For instance, Douglas and Chris Tompkins donation, what they did for the creation of the Patagonia route that created this systemic reality of more than 2,000 kilometers of routes connecting different parts, makes Chile to lead percentages in terms of water and land protected. But we still have this sad record of being one of the 10 countries with the least funding, less than $2, $1.6 per hectare, and some of the countries are over $40 or $100 per hectare. And the legislation punishes the ones who want to support this action. So, Amigos de los Parques is an organization that wants to protect parks, and we believe in alliances, cooperation, and the local knowledge in order to protect lands. Amigos de los Parques consider environmental philanthropy when we realize that there's a brutal context of lack of incentives in order to protect nature. That's why, together with a group of 100 persons and with some other organizations, such as Gente Conservación, Punta de Lobos, organizations, many friends were talking about 46 NGOs, La Paz, Trinity, and some others who created this environmental philanthropy network that wants to take charge of this, which is so necessary. And this is we want to create a change in values. We want to improve culture. We want to make philanthropy visible in terms of results, in terms of jobs, in terms of the access to services, ecosystemic services, goods, and the antidotes for climate change. There are many different research. National Geographic about carbon effects or concentration of carbon dioxide in Patagonia. So we need to inform the community so we can reactivate this country agenda. The idea is to create a context where philanthropy, environmental philanthropy, feels closer to people through the means that we have now. We don't really need to invent anything. We need to let people know about what we have with market experiences such as Frutillar is so beautiful. We talked about it with Beto. And for instance, from the vision of a philanthropic group of the His family that has donated Teatro Lago that funds centers of scholarships for children, youngsters, and adults, and it has a brutal, marvelous impact in society. And UNESCO has acknowledged that. So therefore, we need to rescue all of those activities and we need to include them in different conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugenio. So then how can we reach or take philanthropy to people? How can we develop this? What are we lacking? Where with the impulse of the law of philanthropy, of environmental philanthropy? I would like to know a little bit of that mapping. And I would like to know, how do you think we can be successful in what is being proposed in the Red de Filantropía Ambiental de Chile? Patti, Beto, Eugenio, whoever would like to say something. In the law of philanthropy, there is the network is there. I think there we have to have a regulatory framework. There are laws that are very specific, like in sports, but we need to require that you can understand the role of the people in the development of the country. So in that context, we have to make the rules of the game more clear, so then we can prove the impact. So the conversation is complex, basically because the administrative periods are 4 years, and we know that we are in elections year soon, but here we have a new window, which is also a discussion about what do we want as a country. And I think in that discussion, it is important to relevate the role of the private, because there is some kind of antagonism between the citizens and the private. And what is a better way to explain that the privates are also called to participate in the development of these public policies? So I think it is a very interesting debate, and it will be in a good way on one hand, and then through the civil society, through the foundation. I know there are more than 7,000 in the foundation that we work with, well, through COVID, and now it's more digitalized, but what we do is we work with co-sustainers, and we can realize that the needs, which is not anything new, but the needs are huge. And I would say that as good news and challenge, the good news is that the educational reform allows agencies, and these agencies will allow to develop programs, which is what we do, like what we do with the experiences in open air. And you can work in the different agencies and the different schools where you have these different agencies, so you have certain homogeneous coverage. And that would be in the law of for the new education bill. But in general, you would have to ideally unite initiatives with the other foundations that also work in education areas to be able to have an impact. So the main point is that there be more coordination between the public sector and the private institutions. And also regarding the law, yes, we need changes, but not only for the environment, but for all the different areas in which we have philanthropy is expressed. How can you be able to have that coordination? How can that happen? Maybe Eugenio or Beto, you can have some examples.
Su buena presentación del estado del arte y los desafíos y las posibilidades. Efectivamente, en Chile estamos al debe, como decíamos, hay infinitos cuerpos legales que regulan las donaciones, hay que simplificarlo, hay que hacerlo más económica, o sea, procesalmente más económico, que no sea un proceso tan engorroso. Si bien no nos preocupa como chilenos, digamos, solamente el tema ambiental, el tema medioambiental es el hermano pobre en las donaciones, y hay paradojas muy brutales, como por ejemplo, uno puede hacer el mejor documental, el libro de oro del puma, del ñandú, del huemulo, del cóndor, pero no puede hacer un aporte directo para un collar, para una
we cannot make a contribution for a band contribution, or in order to create some contribution in order to preserve those species. So the paradox is, it is so ridiculous, and we're like a poor brother. So that's why we have given this environmental lesson, even though philanthropy is much wider. How can we coordinate this? There are many different examples of international reality. We have Mexico, Costa Rica, Africa, the USA, and they have different solutions in order to create this advancement, which is required in the coordination of donations. It has to do with creating some declarations, fundamental declarations of principles. For instance, freedom in order to donate. The state should not tell us where or why to donate. We should be free to do that. And then later, we should see what's the impact of that. There are some paths, alternatives, such as indexes of organizations we can receive. For instance, in the case of the US, those are 501, which it is like a permit, and everything you do within the framework of that regulation can have some tax benefit, but we need to create some traceability principles in order to understand where that money is coming from. It should not come from jardining, for instance. So in general terms, we need to be clear about the destination of that donation. Proactive transparency. I mean, at Amigos, Parques, for instance, and many other organizations, they have their social packets, which are these volunteer reports promoted by the Ministry of Justice for the civil society. And you proactively, you share your economic balance indicators, and you create transparency. And that transparency should not only be done in a volunteer way, but it should be the starting point in order to create a standard. Something else, it is to open a viewpoint from cross-sectionality, where not only conventional, that is to say, big museums, education, health, conservation at a big scale of territory, it is included, but also some other activities such as the creation of art, activism, environmental activism, that is a key element, and sometimes people are so afraid of it, but that is a necessary balance in the development of all of this, of society. And hopefully we need to simplify processes. Those would be the 5 most important elements, principles: freedom to donate, simple processes, cross-sectionality, and traceability. So there we have the very base in order to create a clear framework that later it will develop some different or smaller articles. And I like, in the case of Mexico, we're talking about environment, they have this environmental fund. It has almost 20 years of existence, where privates can have some tax benefits in order to donate to different projects all over the country. And that has been included into this fund. The risk is always there in order to say who is the one deciding what can be included within this benefit. But it is a big challenge, but at least we need to advance a little bit in that coordination of these 5 principles.
Thank you, Eugenio. Beto, we
Yes,
would like to
thank you.
hear you.
Yeah, great. And Patty, that's a very great question and an important point. The world, I think, everything goes better when the private sector and the public sector, meaning NGOs and philanthropists, everything, and government for that matter, goes better when they work together rather than in conflict. And so there are quite a few people trying to figure out how to increase this, but I'm just going to give 3 very quick examples of how it worked, and we can understand that there's more work going on. But the first starts with kind of an economic disaster. In Canada, they had a very vibrant fishery called the cod fishery. There's a fish called, in English, cod. And it was always vibrant. It was an economic driver in Canada on the East Coast. And it was very strong in Massachusetts or Northeast US as well. But for this case, in Canada, it was a big deal. And but environmentalists and scientists started saying, hey, you're fishing too much. You're going to finally get to a point where there's no more cod. But the private sector, meaning in this case, the commercial fishers and the government, said, no, that can't be true. There's more fish than ever. Well, obviously, anyway, the fishery collapsed. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of jobs were lost. It was a total emergency. It was like a disaster emergency. Whole coastal communities were wiped out. Because of that disaster, after that, government, NGOs, and private sector started working together. Maybe we do need some regulations here. And so that led, so now the cod fishery is coming back, jobs are coming back, coastal communities are doing better. So that's one, that unfortunately was pushed together by a disaster. The other one I want to mention is in California. It's an energy play. We have a nuclear facility, a nuclear power plant in California called Diablo Canyon, very appropriately named. Obviously, you guys Spanish speakers know what Diablo is. And it was unfortunately built on an earthquake fault. In other words, it was on top of an earthquake fault. It was also poorly designed. I won't go into all the details, but it was bad. Anyway, after quite a few years of trying to figure out what to do, the owner of the nuke plant and the NGO community and government too, but it was really private sector and NGO community worked together to figure out how to safely close that plant. And, of course, the question's always going to be, well, we need that power. We need that electricity. Close the plant and fill in the power with renewable energy. That is happening now. That was PG&E and NRDC and Friends of the Earth, and plus California government to a minor extent. But anyway, very good example of public and private entities working together to get something done that's important. And last but not least, there's many examples, but last but not least, in Chile, I bet a lot of you know that for many years, at least, seems like 15 or 20 years, the NGO community has been pushing very hard on Chile to develop its renewable energy sources, meaning primarily wind and solar. You have the means to do that, the Atacama Desert and other places, but it was slow in coming, but the NGOs really pushed hard on that. And lo and behold, you look up and what's happened, Chile is a leader in renewable energy right now. And that was a synergistic example where the NGO community pushed for this concept, and some very smart people in Chile finally went ahead and implementing and got it done. And now, as you probably all know, Chile is a leader on that front. Anyway, Patty's point to how can we get the nonprofit sector and the private sector to work closely together? You know, the results are very strong. There's lots of reasons to do that, lots of examples. And so maybe the answer to Patty's question about how do we get that to increase is maybe the answer is in trust. There's some distrust on both sides, but if you can develop the trust to work together, things go better. I'll stop at that.
Gracias, Beto.
Thank you, Beto. What happens, I would like to ask also a very specific question. What happens with the investment in philanthropy in the area of conservation, for example, with the local economies? What happens with the generation of jobs? And what happens with the profitability long term? It is a big subject because I can comment that philanthropy, the reserve that we have, it is multidimensional, and it is based on this concept of this initial, that if we are going to conserve, to be able to mitigate the climate change, then it has to be multidimensional. And we work in 4 different axes: environmental, cultural, education, and you have a foundation media, have to do with conservation, all these other areas. Then you have the social part, which means to work the plans and interventions with the communities, because there is no way that you can do conservation, and Eugenio knows that very well, if you do not work from the local with the communities, rescuing their abilities and traditions and making them a part as a priority of the process. So then we have education of environmental education, and not only local, also regional and country, and we're in Chile, and we know that unfortunately for many things, Santiago is as if it were all Chile. And then we also have the cultural area that is not only having to do with those tangible and intangible heritage. In financial, economical, I would say that it is the most complex in Chile to say how to develop a conservation that can be sustainable over a long period of time. Why? Because maybe part of the complexity of our country is that we are a unique laboratory, natural laboratory with different wealth, but we also have a model, a financial, that also is very extractive in these terms of, and we have not been able to migrate to an economy that has added value in services and other industries that are not so just extracting. And so to conserve immediately means tension with what is now one of the main sources of work in many sectors, since we are working in the conservation. So it's not just to get there and point and something very simple. Oh, X industry, and I don't know which one to use an example, but how can we have a reflection, a serious reflection as a country, and how can we vote a serious reflection about the development? What model of are we going to have? How can we transit into, and this is a very serious and deep conversation that has to do with the conservationist. And then when I say it is very key, those things that we do in conservation is we have the spaces in which that we can conserve them, but we have to do it in the operation, which is one dimension, but that means a lot of resources in philanthropy. If you would like to project this to 100 years, which is what we are trying to do now, we are trying to find mechanism to see how can we do these huge land of conservation, but make it sustainable financially long term. So you require the community to work. We are developing small projects that are pilots in the communities in the north and the center and the south, that I hope that we can show conclusions in a couple more years and that it be working. But I would like to also add that it is very important when we talk about sustainability and conservation and economy, socially, environmental. You have to see with the Ministry of Environment that we are working close together with them. And the ministry, it has to go with whatever the law that exists says. So if there is not much law, the ministry cannot do beyond what they are allowed to do. So I think also that is where the conversation with different agents of the society in the same table becomes urgent. This is not something that is going to be resolved only with philanthropy, and it's not only the state either. Everybody has to be sitting at the table, private, the public, those who generate jobs in this area, with those conservative agents and with the communities doing territorial conservation, whether it be the studies to generate evidence, scientific evidence, and with the regulator, who in this case is the state. Thank you, Pati. Eugenio?
I totally agree with what Patty is saying. This is a problem, multi-dimensional problem. It is complex. And each intervention in territory means to include all of those different dimensions. In terms of the territory where we work at, which is in Patagonia Parks, these three regions of Los Lagos, Aysén, and Magallanes, we're still looking for the way to measure the impact of conservation and what conservation creates, which is tourism related to conservation and local development. But in general terms, from the experience, first of all, we have conservation as an opportunity to create a decentralization of the country due to what it may happen related to this element, tourism. The viewpoint, it is from our sector, it is to create a bigger development outside the park. We need to work with communities, host communities of parks, creating a belonging feeling. So they know those protected areas also. With some communities we work with, there are meters away from the park, a school, for instance, 500 meters from the entrance of a park, and students do not know, they have never visited the park. So we have taken them and we took the personnel from the park into the school so we can create a synergy. We have met different experiences of people who had as an only destination to go to visit or go from Patagonia to Santiago or to the mine sites in the northern part, and now they're staying in Patagonia and they're starting an entrepreneurship of lodging, food there, of the gaucha culture, for instance, they're developing, and we have created some ways in order to make up this something which is well articulated. In the case of Los Lagos region, Corfo believed in us in order to create a PPI, which is a program, a long 4-year term program where tourists, actors, Tompkins Conservation, the government, Friends of Parques, they're creating a coordinated view in order to avoid duplicity of activities, as Patty well said. Many foundations intervene some territories and they duplicate efforts instead of distributing efforts. In this community, X community, I will do education, you go with experience and so on. So we need to create a distribution, rational distribution of the limited resources. In the case of El Amarillo in Chaitén, I don't know if you have heard it, it is a clear example, robust example of what a park can create in the environment, where a situation, let's say, there was an initial resistance and now everyone is supporting it. It transformed infrastructure existing there, it harmonizes it with nature. And there is Chaitén. It is a city that lives looking at the park. It is one of the 1,000 examples that we could mention in Patagonia, but it is interesting. At the beginning, mayors were against parks, and now mayors, they want to be part of the board of directors of Friends of Parks. They understand there's an opportunity there. Those are slow processes, but they speak by themselves. And in general terms, in comparison, there are some data, of course, that shows these calculations. We're working with Universidad de Chile in order to know on how much of what is invested in nature, it creates an impact in the economy. But Brazil, for instance, says that per every dollar invested in conservation, $8 get to the nearby communities. Waldron report that includes ecosystemic reports and the impact in economy. It talks about 1 peso in conservation, 5 pesos for the world economy. So it is said as the most powerful and robust strategy sustainable for the recovery post-COVID. This is a report done by this foundation with National Geographic. As I said before, in Chile, we have not done it, but we're going to have a study case with Lexel from Universidad de Chile, led by Guillermo Larraín, part of our council, and Willow, showing the chaining, prolific chaining of the private conservation in communities, nearby communities, related to services, hosting, craft, local craft. Many opportunities which are open, which otherwise would not be open. Willow maybe in the northern, but for Patagonia, they're so far away from Santiago, which it seems to be Chile. It is something, it could be a punishment, but now it is a treasure, and they're discovering it, and they're taking the most of it. So there's a huge opportunity. And something else I want to highlight, a CEPHIS research. There's a poll, country poll, survey, where citizens say that they have more than 84% of positive impression of what this sector does from philanthropy for Chile. I have a huge, they trust it so much. They trust philanthropy in different fields in order to solve problems timely. So the goal here, it is to create citizenship active, philanthropic, and to return to the initial topic, philanthropy, it is something we're all responsible for. Douglas Cummings said we need to pay our rent for living in the country. That could be done in money, with our talents, with our passions as well. But no one is outside this global challenge that we have, and local challenges also.
Thank you, Eugenio. We are now completing our time, but Beto, I have a specific question for you. They are saying here, what tools are being used to measure the impact of investment of philanthropy today, at least there in the United States and California? Could you comment a little bit on that?
Well, I will. A lot of money, time, and thought has been put into what we call evaluation and monitoring. And I know, obviously, mostly the Marisla style, but in general, it starts with the proposal process when an NGO submits a proposal to a foundation, which I will add is an art form. It's not a science. You know, there is an art to doing these proposals, and some NGOs have figured out exactly how to write it so it resonates with the program officer at a foundation. And, you know, some NGOs haven't figured it out, and those, even though they do great work, they might not get funded. And so, to the Marisla point, we try to take that into account, and even unsophisticated, what you'd say unsophisticated or nuanced NGOs who apply, we give them a strong shot, because not everyone knows the art of writing a proposal. We think that's important, and we don't hold it against anyone for not being great at proposals. But nonetheless, it starts with the proposal, and you have to ask a strong question of what is it you want to do? What is it you're proposing to do? And obviously, how much are you asking for? Those two things are important. And at the end of the grant period, normally for us it's a year, you see, it's very easy. Did you do what you said you were going to do? Now, so that's at a pretty micro level how we evaluate. If they did not, there might be extenuating circumstances, which is fine. We understand everything in life is not perfect, so we get that. But we do get to see, did they do what they said they were going to do? That's at a micro level. At a larger level, at a higher level, we support a lot of groups that work on environmental legislation, but not only, also pollution laws and some education things. You know, they're working on policy issues. So we will monitor and see if that legislation passed, if the policies went through that we really wanted. Those are lots of times longer term, so you have to be patient. And we are very patient. Some people on this call know we're very patient. We stick with groups a long time to get things done. And we understand that. But anyway, so the other, to answer your question, Barbara, we see if the policies or legislation went through, if resources are being protected like we want. And then last but not least, one of the most unsung parts of philanthropy is what we'd call stopping bad projects, projects that are destructive to communities or people's health or ecosystems. If there are NGOs who are trying to stop a destructive project, if we support them, then of course the ultimate measure is, did it get stopped? So those are at the detailed, medium, and high level point.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias. His answer is very interesting because philanthropy, we proposed a couple years ago to try to generate the philanthropy through the service where you can measure if the project is being developed or not. But in our case that we work in education, science, and conservation, there are many different kind of evaluations. You have the results. The most interesting and the more complex are the impact evaluations. And in education, it is a key to be able to advance in that, because then you can see the idea of the alternatives, because if what you are assigning to a project, if you think you're advancing in something to see if it's working or not, and in this sense of responsibility and to be able to add value, it's a key. So in education, what we have started to do is to evaluate, first check the designs of the programs, develop evaluations regarding competencies and the technologies at UNESCO, and then also be with dialogue with what the government is doing. So it's a double click of the philanthropy, but the philanthropical world is very broad, and a lot has to do with how do I align what is happening, at least in the intention of the Ministry of Education, that has to do with the law, which is very broad. So we have a great general law of education in the ministry that uses the resources it has. Since there is a huge world that is helping, the logical would be to allow them to advance and to show certain things that have been brought about, and that they can be replicated throughout the whole country. That would be the optimal situation. And in science, there's research, scientific research. You have regarding what is trying to be obtained, and they also have the educational, environmental programs. We can see according to the results with the same logic. In spite of the environmental, it depends on the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Environment. We are advancing in that sense, and with the team that is doing the studies. And I think in conservation, there it depends a little bit, for us at least, in the plans of conservation. So each territory with their methodology has a plan of concentration that has the species that are under threat, and with those species we determine then the line of work that we are going to carry out to be able to conserve that species. So as long as we go advancing and going through it, that we evaluate if we are coming along correctly or not. That is very complicated. In any public policy, in any program, it is very complicated, and I can't get too tired of saying that we need to advance with accountability, but we need to make sure that we are doing our job well. So now we have a few words to close now. So I would like to hear from Eugenio, then Beto, and then Patti to be able to close. What is happening with having people trust more, a challenge in that area? Eugenio, you first.
Okay, 1 minute. I would invite the idea that we can all be philanthropers. Philanthropy It is something that dignifies us, it unites us as human beings. And it is beautiful to devote that, our own engine that makes us different from other species in order to take care of this community of life which we're part of. So philanthropy, environmental philanthropy in every single territory of our continent, country, the planet is calling us, and we need to pay attention to that call. And of course, we all have resources, talents, a network, an idea in order to add it to this cause. So you're all invited to be philanthropy citizens and hopefully wake up. We need to wake up the environment nearby us because there are always some threats there.
Wonderful. You, Beto?
Palabras al cierre.
Well, I would take at a very high level. Well, start with this. What we say in English, the proof is in the pudding. As NGOs essentially are saints, many of them. They're working on behalf of their communities or people's health, or a forest or a river or a coast, something like that. They're not out for personal gain. Everyone would like to make more money, that's true, but that isn't their driving force. They're doing something a little bit bigger. As we say, you don't find that many millionaires who are running an NGO these days, but you see them in other places. So I think as the trust will build, as there's a greater perception that NGOs and organizations are really working hard for the good of society. So you start there. You can argue about that if you want, but I think you can make a good case for that. But then I would like to end on a high, from the 30,000 foot level about trust and what's going to happen with philanthropy in the future is COVID. We know we're in COVID. It's a pandemic. Things are really difficult now, but it will end. It will come to an end, and things won't go back to the way they were, but they'll go back to something close enough. And there's going to be a global search, what I'd call a global search for talent. In other words, there are entrepreneurs in the world who have a lot of great ideas, and they will be looking for places to live and to implement their ideas. And they are going to be drawn to special places. Just here in the US, many were drawn to California. We're the 7th largest economy in the world. One big reason is because it's a kind of a nice state. We have generally clean water, clean air, clean coast, fishing, beaches, all that stuff. And that was all driven because of NGOs and organizations that pushed for that stuff. And it was always a fight. People said, oh, we can't clean the air, or we don't need to, or you're going to wreck business. It did none of those. It made it a nice place. Entrepreneurs ended up in, for instance, Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, and they've done a lot of great things. And that's going to continue. There will be a global search for talent. And those talented people, those entrepreneurs, they're not, for instance, they didn't all flood here in the United States. They didn't flood to Louisiana just as an example. They went to Silicon Valley. And that's going to happen globally. And Chile is so well positioned to be attractive to those types of people. But a lot will depend on if it remains a great, beautiful, clean, well-organized country. And I think it will become obvious soon enough that that is what Chile is doing. It's well-organized, it's rule of law, it's people are working on clean air, forests, coast, fisheries. It's charming, the people are great, there's a lot of character. And I think in the global search for talent, if things keep going the way they are, meaning in the direction of that a lot of nonprofit civil society organizations would like, with equity and a good economic system, and a nice environment, things are going to go really well for Chile.
Gracias, Beto. Nos deja
Thank you,
con el
Beto.
ánimo.
And you leave you're very encouraged regarding Chile.
Pati Morales,
Pati
cerramos
Morales,
contigo. ¿Estás
we
ahí?
close with you.
Tu micrófono, micrófono.
Your mic is muted.
Ahí sí.
There we go.
Gracias. Estaba muy inspirada. No,
I was very inspired, but
invitación.
thank you once again for the invitation. And I think that just to close, I would like to say that with the urgency, I would like to focus on the urgency that we have to do with the climate change and the thinking, rethinking the model that we have now, something that is not only for Chile, but all of the international community. And in that context, I think that we need to assume that these are challenges that are going to be only for the private sector or only for the civil society or only for the public sector. It has to be together, and there's a lot of different areas that, and we have seen it in sad conditions, but we can see how quickly it can be reorganized, and there are things that are and I think that what we need to do is take advantage of that context to generate a dialogue. And I hope that that dialogue can be done on the way to the three different areas that we have been talking about, to be able to have institutionalize this and to be able to formalize philanthropy. I think that I believe in the role of generators of social wealth. And I think that is a great responsibility they have, a beautiful one. And I am very happy that there are business people here in Chile that are like that. And we just hope that there are many more, and that all citizens feel like philanthropists and be a part of a dynamic that is much greater. But I think we need to see it that way, that everything that is we are still lacking to do, but with optimism, but also with urgency. Thank you. Patricia Morales is from Philanthropía Cortés Solari, and Eugenio Rengifo with Corporación Amigos del Parques de Patagonia, and also Beto from Foundation Marisla. And it's been a pleasure. We have all been very entertained today, very interesting, and thank you so much for participating with us today in this conversation that you may have. I wish you all well, very well.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And for those of you who are still with us, we would like to comment that this digital conversation will be then on the YouTube page in Chile California Council, and also in Ladera Sur, in this initiative that we do together, and with the council in Ladera Sur, and with this cycle of the conversations, and then what? Building a resilient planet. So thank you all who have been with us during this whole cycle of 6 conversations, and we hope that they have been something that you have enjoyed and that you have learned as much as we have with these tremendous panelists. So anything else, we will be giving any news on our website. So thank you so much. May you all be very well. Bye-bye.